Imagine that one morning you wake up, walk up to a mirror, and realize that for the first time in the history of humanity, death no longer feels inevitable. No, this is not about a magic pill, not about a fictional elixir of youth, and not even about some secret project that will supposedly change the world tomorrow. This is about an idea that until very recently seemed like pure science fiction, but today is increasingly being discussed in the laboratories of the world's largest technology companies. The idea of digitizing human consciousness. Imagine that one day a person's memory, character, recollections, emotions, habits, knowledge, and even personality itself could exist not only inside a biological brain, but also in digital form. If such a thing ever becomes possible, it will not be just another technological breakthrough. It will become the most monumental event in the entire history of civilization. Perhaps at that moment, humanity will divide its history into two eras, before digital immortality and after it. But the most interesting part is that if you ask most people today, which company could potentially bring humanity closer to such a technology, many will surprisingly not name Google or OpenAI. Instead, one name is increasingly mentioned: Neuralink. Elon Musk's company, currently best known for its brain implants, is already taking its first steps toward connecting the human brain with a computer. And although Neuralink itself is not officially working on digital immortality, many experts believe that such technologies could become the first building block in a far more ambitious future. At first glance, it seems that there is a huge gap between controlling a computer cursor with thought and transferring human consciousness into a machine. But if we look closely at how modern neuroscience is developing, it becomes clear that both technologies start from the same task: learning to understand the language of the brain. After all, the human brain does not speak in words. It communicates through electrical impulses, chemical signals, and incredibly complex chains of interactions between billions of neurons. Every time you remember the face of a loved one, hear your favorite music, or make a decision, billions of microscopic processes occur simultaneously inside your head. These are exactly the processes that modern brain-computer interfaces are trying to learn to read. And here is where things become even more interesting. Many people imagine Neuralink as a device that simply allows you to move a computer cursor with your mind. But in reality, this achievement is only the tip of a massive iceberg. For a computer to understand the intention of a person to press a virtual button, it must first learn to recognize the activity of specific groups of neurons. This means that artificial intelligence is gradually beginning to learn the language of the human brain. Today, this language is only understood at the most basic level. A computer can detect the intention to move a cursor, select a letter, or perform a simple action. But what will happen in 10, 20, or 30 years? What if one day computers can understand not individual commands, but complex memories, emotions, or even entire thoughts? This is where we enter a domain where modern scientific achievements end and cautious scientific hypotheses begin. No company in the world today can read human consciousness as a whole. Moreover, scientists still cannot even define consciousness precisely. We know how individual neurons work. We understand how electrical signals are transmitted. We can build incredibly detailed maps of the brain. But we still cannot answer the main question. Why does this electrical activity give rise to the feeling of a self? Why does a human not simply process information, but experience themselves as a personality? This mystery remains one of the greatest scientific enigmas of the 21st century. And yet the pace of progress in recent years is astonishing. Not long ago, scientists could observe only small regions of the brain. Today, thanks to artificial intelligence and modern electron microscopes, researchers are already creating three-dimensional maps of millions of neural connections. Companies and scientific institutions are gradually getting closer to understanding the architecture of the human brain. The more such maps appear, the better researchers understand how different regions of the brain interact with each other. Now imagine that such research continues not for 10 or 20 years, but for an entire century. Artificial intelligence becomes significantly smarter than humans. Computing power increases thousands or even millions of times. Robots gain the ability to operate at the atomic level. Medical technologies make it possible to observe every neuron almost in real time. In such a world, the idea of full digital brain modeling no longer looks absolutely impossible. That is why many experts closely follow Elon Musk's statements. Musk has repeatedly said that the long-term goal of Neuralink is to create the closest possible connection between humans and artificial intelligence. In his view, if a super-intelligent AI ever appears, humans will need a way to interact with it much faster than is possible today through a keyboard or a smartphone screen. Neuralink is seen as a kind of digital bridge between the human brain and future computing systems. At the same time, Musk has not stated that the company is already working on mind uploading or digital immortality. This is important to understand. However, many researchers believe that the development of brain-computer interfaces could potentially bring science closer to answers to questions that today seem purely fantastical. But why does the idea of digital immortality generate such interest in the first place? The answer is quite simple. Throughout human history, people have tried to defeat death. Some searched for the philosopher's stone, others dreamed of an elixir of eternal youth. Modern medicine extends life, treats diseases, and performs organ transplants. However, all these methods have limits. The biological body ages. Cells gradually lose their ability to regenerate. And if it ever turns out that personality can be preserved independently of the body, the consequences would be so vast that they would transform literally every sphere of human life. Imagine a doctor with 500 years of experience. Imagine an engineer designing spacecraft using knowledge accumulated over several centuries. Imagine a scientist who does not lose their discoveries with their own life. If a human personality could truly exist in digital form, civilization would begin to develop at a completely different pace. Each generation would no longer start almost from scratch. Knowledge could be transmitted not only through books, universities, and video lectures, but perhaps one day even directly through interaction between the brain and computing systems. For now, this remains a scientific hypothesis, but such ideas are increasingly discussed in academic circles. However, this raises a question that concerns philosophers no less than engineers. If one day it becomes possible to create an exact digital copy of your brain, would that truly be you? Or would it simply be a digital double that believes it is you, remembers your childhood, recognizes your friends, and sincerely believes that it is the continuation of your personality? Today, no one knows the answer, and perhaps this question will turn out to be much more complex than any engineering challenge. Therefore, the discussion about digital immortality is not only a discussion about technology, it is a discussion about the nature of the human being, consciousness, and life itself. If Neuralink continues to develop at this pace, it is quite possible that future generations of engineers, building on the achievements of this company and modern neuroscience as a whole, will come closer to answers that today seem almost unattainable. Perhaps right now, humanity is not witnessing the creation of digital immortality, but only the very first, barely noticeable step on an unimaginably long path toward it. But if we continue to think further, it becomes obvious that the very idea of digital immortality is not limited by computers at all. Many people assume that the main problem lies in insufficiently powerful processors or neural networks that are too slow. In reality, this is far from true. The most difficult task is understanding the human brain itself, and here Neuralink could potentially play a much more important role than it might seem at first glance. Today, the Neuralink implant is capable of reading only the activity of a small part of the brain. Thousands of ultra-thin electrodes register the electrical impulses of neurons, after which artificial intelligence begins to look for patterns. Imagine a person who has never heard a foreign language. At first, it will be just a chaotic set of sounds for them, but gradually they begin to understand individual words, then short sentences, then entire dialogues. In roughly the same way, the interaction between artificial intelligence and the human brain is developing today. For now, computers understand only the simplest commands, but each new generation of algorithms learns to recognize increasingly complex patterns. That is why many researchers believe that the next 20 years will become an era of a real revolution in neuroscience. Artificial intelligence today is already capable of finding patterns in gigantic datasets that a human would never be able to notice on their own. If Neuralink and similar technologies continue to improve, the amount of information about brain function will grow literally exponentially, and the more data AI receives, the faster it begins to understand the structure of the most complex object in the universe, the human brain. Imagine a scenario that today seems like science fiction. A person puts on a next-generation neural implant. It not only helps control a computer, but also constantly analyzes brain activity. Day after day, artificial intelligence observes which areas of the brain become active when a person remembers their parents, feels joy, fear, inspiration, or makes complex decisions. After several years, such a system may know your brain better than anyone else, including yourself. Of course, at the moment this is only a hypothetical scenario. Modern implants do not have such capabilities. But this is precisely the direction in which the entire field may evolve in the long term. It is also interesting that Elon Musk himself has repeatedly spoken about the need to increase the bandwidth of interaction between humans and computers. Today, we communicate with technology incredibly slowly. We type text with our fingers. We press buttons. We move a mouse. Even voice assistants remain a rather limited way of transmitting information. Musk believes that such limitations will eventually be overcome. If the brain can exchange information directly with a computer, the speed of interaction will increase many times over. And although such a goal is currently aimed primarily at helping people with severe medical conditions, in the distant future, such technologies may change the very understanding of the capabilities of the human mind. However, this is precisely where the most serious risks also appear. If a computer one day learns to read information directly from the brain, a completely new level of questions about security arises. Today, many people worry about leaks of photos, messages, or banking data. But imagine a world where human memories become the target of cyber attacks. This sounds like science fiction, yet information security specialists are already discussing such scenarios as potential long-term challenges. If neural interfaces become widespread, protecting brain data may turn out to be even more important than protecting bank accounts. Another problem is the extraordinary complexity of the brain itself. It contains about 86 billion neurons connected by hundreds of trillions of synapses. What matters is not only the structure of these connections. Chemical processes play an enormous role, as do the concentration of various substances, the state of proteins, hormonal balance, and many other factors. Therefore, even if scientists one day manage to build a perfect map of the brain, this still would not automatically mean that they can reproduce human consciousness. It is possible that an enormous number of additional processes would need to be taken into account, processes whose existence we are not even aware of yet. That is why many leading neuroscientists treat the topic of digital immortality with great caution. They do not say that it is impossible, but they also do not claim that such a technology will necessarily appear. Science simply does not yet have enough knowledge. Nevertheless, the history of humanity has repeatedly shown that problems once considered completely impossible became everyday reality within a few decades. Human spaceflight to the moon was once considered science fiction. Artificial hearts, organ transplants, artificial intelligence capable of writing programs on its own, and controlling robots. All of this, until very recently, existed only in books and films. That is why Neuralink attracts so much attention today. Not because the company is already creating digital immortality, but because it is developing a fundamental technology without which such ideas cannot even be discussed. In order to one day attempt to preserve human consciousness, it is first necessary to understand the brain. And to understand the brain, it is necessary to learn how to interact with it. And this is exactly what Neuralink is working on today. Sometimes the question arises, would Elon Musk himself ever want to go beyond medical applications and try to develop technologies related to preserving human personality? There is no definitive answer. Musk has not publicly announced any such projects. But if we look at the history of his companies, an interesting pattern emerges. Almost all of them are built around one major idea: expanding the capabilities of humanity. SpaceX aims to make humans a multi-planetary species, Tesla accelerates the transition to sustainable energy. XAI develops artificial intelligence. Neuralink works on interfaces between the brain and computers. Therefore, it is not surprising that some analysts suggest that if a real scientific opportunity to approach the preservation of human consciousness ever appears, such a goal could potentially interest Musk. But today, this remains only an assumption, not a confirmed company plan. And perhaps this is exactly what makes the entire story so fascinating. We are living at a moment when the first building blocks of such technologies are already appearing, but no one yet knows where this path will ultimately lead. It is possible that in 50 or 100 years, historians will look back at the first Neuralink implants in the same way we today look at the first computers that occupied entire rooms. At that time, few could have imagined that one day a powerful computer would fit in the pocket of almost every person. It is not impossible that modern brain-computer interfaces are only the earliest stage of technologies that will one day redefine the very meaning of human life. That is why today Neuralink is being watched not only by engineers and doctors, but also by philosophers, physicists, artificial intelligence researchers, and millions of people around the world, aware that they may be witnessing the beginning of one of the most extraordinary scientific stories of the 21st century. But there is another possible scenario for how events may unfold, one that is discussed much less often today, even though it may turn out to be the most realistic. Many people imagine digital immortality as the instantaneous uploading of a human mind into a computer. However, the history of technology shows that revolutions almost never happen in a single day. More often, they consist of hundreds of small steps, each of which on its own seems insignificant. This is exactly how the internet, artificial intelligence, and space technologies evolved. It is quite possible that neurointerfaces will follow a similar path. Imagine that in 10 or 15 years, implants become so advanced that they can not only help people with medical conditions, but also gradually enhance memory. Then systems may appear that are capable of storing important memories in digital form. Later, technologies could learn to restore lost fragments of memory after severe brain injuries. The next stage might involve systems that can create a detailed digital model of a person by analyzing years of their thoughts, habits, communication style, and memories. Formally, this would still not be mind uploading, but such a model could reproduce the characteristics of a specific person with extraordinary accuracy. It is precisely these intermediate stages that many experts consider far more likely than the sudden emergence of true digital immortality. And here another unusual question arises. What exactly counts as immortality? If, in 100 years, your descendants are able to speak with a digital system that remembers your entire life, responds in your voice, knows your habits, favorite books, sense of humor, and way of thinking, would it just be a program? Or would part of your personality truly continue to exist? There is still no definitive answer. Moreover, many philosophers believe that questions like this may one day become far more important than the technologies themselves. Equally interesting is the connection between such developments and future space missions. Elon Musk has been speaking for many years about the need to make humanity a multiplanetary species. But journeys to other star systems may take decades or even centuries. That is why some futurists suggest that in a very distant future, the development of neurointerfaces and brain modeling technologies may prove useful not only on Earth. For now, this remains purely a scientific hypothesis. But if humanity ever does travel to other stars, new ways of preserving knowledge and personality may become one of the most important technologies of a future space civilization. However, before reaching such scenarios, humanity still has a very long path ahead. Today, Neuralink is only at the very beginning of its story. The company continues to improve implants, increase the number of data channels, refine signal processing algorithms, and conduct clinical trials. Each new achievement helps scientists better understand brain function and brings the next step slightly closer. Perhaps ahead of us lie decades of discoveries, many of which are still impossible to imagine today. But even now, one thing is clear. For the first time in its history, humanity is not only studying the brain from the outside, but gradually learning to interact with it directly. And many scientists see this moment as the beginning of a completely new era, the consequences of which may be as significant as the invention of electricity, computers, or the internet itself. Perhaps it is our contemporaries who are witnessing the first pages of the history of a technology that will one day force people to completely rethink life, memory, consciousness, and the very meaning of human existence. And yet, no matter how incredible such a future may seem, there is one idea that unites almost all scientists working in this field. They agree that the real breakthrough will not come when computers become faster, but when humanity finally understands the very mechanism by which consciousness arises. Perhaps this will become the most important scientific discovery in the entire history of civilization, because if we ever manage to understand how billions of neurons give rise to human personality, memory, emotions, and the sense of the self, entirely new horizons will open for humanity. We will learn to treat diseases that are considered incurable today, restore damaged regions of the brain, return lost memories to people, and possibly come closer to answering the question that has fascinated philosophers and scientists for thousands of years. Can human consciousness be preserved after biological life ends? For now, this remains one of the boldest scientific hypotheses of our time. Neuralink is not creating digital immortality, and no one in the world today possesses such a technology. But it is precisely the development of brain-computer interfaces, artificial intelligence, and brain research that is gradually bringing humanity closer to understanding what once seemed completely unattainable. It may take several decades before we see the next major step forward, or it may take an entire century. But one thing is already clear. For the first time in its history, humanity is not only dreaming of understanding its own mind, it is beginning to build the tools that allow it to study it from the inside, step by step. And who knows, perhaps many years from now, historians will describe this period as the moment when the most extraordinary scientific revolution in human history began. A revolution that will one day transform our understanding not only of technology, but of life itself, memory, and human consciousness.